I was reviewing the final blueprints for a $42 million civic center when my mother walked into my Manhattan office without an appointment, slammed a manila folder onto my drafting table, and announced that my younger brother would be taking over as creative director by the end of the week. My senior project manager froze in the corner. The two clients from the Beacon Hill Development Group, who were standing right there reviewing the renderings with me, exchanged a glance that I felt in my bones. My mother didn't even look at them. She just stared at me, waiting for the apology she thought she was owed. I set down my pen, smiled the way I'd been practicing in mirrors for 2 years, and told her to go ahead and call him. She didn't know who him was yet. She would in about 90 seconds. My name is Tessa Brockwood. I'm 31 years old. I founded Brockwood Studio when I was 26 with a small business loan and a single freelance contract. And by that morning in late September, I had grown it into a 38-person architecture firm with offices in Manhattan and Boston, a roster of municipal clients, and a reputation for designing public spaces that actually felt human. None of that mattered to my family. To my family, I was, and always had been, the disappointment with the drafting hobby. Let me back up. I grew up in a town outside Hartford that looked like a postcard and operated like a feudal court. My father, Howard Brockwood, was a regional banking executive who believed sons inherited and daughters married. My mother, who insisted everyone call her by her full name, Marguerite, even her own children, came from old Connecticut money that had thinned out by the time I was born, but still carried enough social weight that she planned every holiday around who would be at the country club. They had 3 children. My older sister Camille, who married a hedge fund associate at 23 and produced 2 grandsons before she turned 30, was the trophy. My younger brother Hugh, who failed out of 2 colleges and got his MBA from a school I'd never heard of after my father wrote a check, was the heir. And then there was me, the middle child. The one who took apart the kitchen radio when she was 6 and asked too many questions at dinner. I knew I wanted to design buildings by the time I was 9. My grandfather, who lived with us until I was 12, had been a draftsman at a small firm in New Haven, and he kept his old T-square and triangles in a leather case under his bed. He'd show me how to lay out a floor plan on a Saturday morning while my mother was at her tennis lesson. When he died, I took the case. My mother tried to throw it out twice. I caught her the second time and screamed loud enough that the neighbors came to the door. When I told my parents I was applying to architecture school, my father laughed for a full minute. Not a chuckle. A full, sustained laugh. My mother told me that women who designed things ended up alone and bitter, and that I should consider interior decorating if I needed a creative outlet, because at least decorators married well. I applied anyway. I got into Cornell on a partial scholarship. They paid for Hugh's first failed semester at a private college that year instead of contributing to my tuition. I worked 3 jobs and graduated with $81,000 of debt and a portfolio that won me a junior position at a firm in Boston that didn't care who my father was. For 5 years I kept my head down, learned everything I could, watched the partners and figured out who was building careers and who was just collecting a salary. My family came to my graduation but spent the dinner talking about Hugh's new internship. Camille brought a baby gift for someone I'd never met. My father gave me a card with a $50 bill in it and a note that said, "For groceries." I framed the note. It's still on the wall of my office. When I started Brockwood Studio at 26, I called my father to tell him. He said, and I'm quoting word for word because I wrote it down that night, "Honey, please don't embarrass yourself. Architecture is for men with connections. Come work at the bank. I can get you a job in the design department, choosing carpet samples." I hung up. My mother called back an hour later and told me I was breaking my father's heart. I said nothing. She called me selfish. I said nothing. She called me ungrateful. I said nothing. She finally said, "If you do this, don't come crying to us when it falls apart." I said I won't. And I hung up. I did not invite them to my opening. I did not invite them to my first ribbon cutting. I did not invite them to the dinner where my mentor toasted me at the AIA Awards 2 years later. They found out about all of it through Camille, who got her information from a cousin who followed me on LinkedIn and reported back to my mother like she was running an intelligence operation. We were not estranged exactly. We were something worse. We were polite at Christmas. My mother sent cards on my birthday with $20 in them, which was the same amount she'd been sending since I was 16. My father called twice a year to ask if I was still doing the drawing thing. I went home for Thanksgiving twice in 5 years and left both times by the pie course because Hugh got drunk and made a comment about how nice it must be to play house in New York with no real responsibilities. Camille's husband once asked me, with a perfectly straight face, if I had ever considered that maybe my creative struggles came from not having children. I told him that was a fascinating theory, and asked his wife if she ever considered that maybe her struggles came from marrying a man with the emotional range of a hat rack. We have not spoken since. So you understand the context when I tell you that my mother walking into my office that September morning was, on its own, an act of war. She had never set foot in my Manhattan space. She had never asked to see it. The last time she'd seen my work was a sketch I'd taped to the refrigerator in 2009. Here's what I learned in the 72 hours before she showed up. Hugh, who is 28, who has worked at 4 firms in 5 years, who got fired from his last job at a marketing agency for reasons no one would explain to me, had decided he was going to transition into the family business. That phrase made me laugh out loud when I heard it. The family business. As if Brockwood Studio was a passed-down dry cleaner. As if I hadn't built every inch of it myself. He had apparently been telling my parents for months that I was struggling, that the firm was hemorrhaging money, that I was on the verge of a breakdown, that without an experienced businessman at the helm I'd lose everything. None of this was true. The firm had just closed its best fiscal quarter in our history, but my parents wanted to believe it, because the alternative was admitting they'd been wrong about me for 2 decades, and Marguerite Brockwood would sooner walk barefoot through a snake pit than admit she was wrong about anything. I learned all of this because Hugh's wife, a woman named Brittna, who I genuinely liked despite everything, called me in tears at 11 o'clock on a Sunday night. She told me Hugh had been on the phone with my mother for an hour and they were planning something. She didn't know the details. She just knew it involved me, and a contract, and the words, "We'll force her hand." She was crying because Hugh had also told her they'd be moving to New York within the month, and she didn't want to leave her parents in Hartford. I thanked her. I told her she did the right thing. I asked her to please not mention the call to Hugh. And then I sat in my apartment in the dark for an hour and let myself feel everything I'd been refusing to feel for 15 years. Then I got to work. I called my attorney Monday morning. His name is Dale Mortensen. He's been with me since the firm was 3 people in a sublet, and he has the patience of a glacier and the instincts of a wolf. I told him everything. I told him what I suspected they were going to try. He listened without interrupting for about 10 minutes. And then he said, "Tessa, do you want to win or do you want to be done?" I said I wanted both. He said, "Then we need to make it so spectacular they never come back." We spent 48 hours preparing. I won't tell you everything we did, because some of it I'm still proud of and want to keep for myself. But here are the broad strokes. First, we audited the corporate structure of Brockwood Studio top to bottom. I'm the sole owner. I have no partners, no outside investors, no board. The firm is an S-corp wholly owned by me, with operating agreements that name no one but me and my chief of staff as authorized signatories. Whatever paper my mother was about to slam on my desk, it had no legal standing unless I signed it. We confirmed this in writing from 2 separate firms by Tuesday afternoon. Second, we did a quiet investigation into Hugh. Dale knew a guy. The guy knew another guy. By Wednesday, I had a summary of my brother's last 3 jobs that included the actual reasons he'd been let go from each one. The marketing agency, it turned out, had paid him a settlement to leave quietly after a junior designer accused him of harassment. The agency had made her sign an NDA. She had reached out to a labor attorney 6 months later, and the labor attorney had reached out to Dale's guy, and now I had her name and her contact information and a very clear picture of exactly what kind of man my brother had become while I wasn't looking. Third, and this is the part I will admit was a little theatrical, I called Beacon Hill Development and asked if their principals could come into my office Thursday morning to review the Civic Center renderings. They were already planning to come the following week. I just moved the meeting up. I told them I wanted them to see the space. I wanted them to walk through the office and meet the team. They were happy to oblige. They are nice men. One of them, a man named Walt Henley, has known me since I was a junior designer, and he was an associate developer trying to make his first project pencil out. We've been through a lot together. Fourth, I called my parents on Wednesday night. I called my mother specifically. I told her, in a voice I made sure was small and slightly wavering, that I'd been thinking about everything Hugh had said at Easter, and that maybe she was right. Maybe I did need help. Maybe we should sit down and talk as a family. I asked her if she could come to my office Thursday morning. She tried so hard not to sound triumphant. She failed. She said she'd be there at 10. She told me to prepare myself emotionally. I told her I would. She arrived at 9:58. Hugh and my father came in behind her at 10:03. I was at the drafting table with Walt Henley and his partner Diego, going over the elevation drawings for the Civic Center. My project manager Renata was at the corner desk. 2 junior designers were at the long table behind us. The reception area was visible through the glass wall. There were maybe a dozen people in eyeshot. My mother walked in like she was inspecting a property she'd just inherited. She didn't say hello. She didn't acknowledge that I was in a meeting. She walked straight to the drafting table, set the manila folder down on top of the blueprints I had been working on, and said, "Tessa, this has gone on long enough. Your father and I have spoken with Hugh, and we've come to a decision. He will be joining the firm effective immediately as creative director. He will oversee all major design decisions and client relationships. You will retain a role as senior designer. We've drawn up the paperwork. We expect you to sign by the end of the week." Walt looked at me. I looked at Walt. Diego, who I had only met twice before, looked deeply, painfully embarrassed for me. I picked up the folder. I opened it. I scanned the first page. It was a document drawn up by someone who had clearly never seen a real corporate ownership transfer in his life. It was the kind of thing you'd find on a free legal forms website. It demanded I transfer 51% of voting equity to Hugh in exchange for the sum of $1. It listed my father as a witness. It was notarized. It would not have held up in a small claims court, let alone a Manhattan business dispute. I closed the folder. I set it down. I looked at my mother and I asked her, "Did you have an attorney review this?" She bristled. She said, "Your father reviewed it personally. He's been a banking executive for 32 years. I think he knows what a contract looks like." I looked at my father. He was standing slightly behind her, arms crossed, doing his disappointed patriarch face. Hugh was off to the side, smirking. He was wearing a blazer that didn't fit him and shoes that were too brown for the suit. I said, "Hugh, do you understand what's in this document?" He said, "I understand. I'm tired of watching you run our family name into the ground." Renata, in the corner, made a sound that was almost a laugh and almost a cough. "I will love her until the day I die for that sound." I said, "Our family name. Walt, when you and I started working together, what was the name on the firm?" Walt said very evenly, "Brockwood Studio. Tessa Brockwood, principal, same as today." I said, "And who funded the firm in 2018? Walt said, "You did, with a loan and your own savings. I remember because I was your second client and you billed us at half rate to keep the lights on." I said, "Did you ever meet anyone else in my family during that period?" Walt said, "I did not. I didn't know you had a family until you mentioned a sister at a Christmas dinner 4 years ago." My mother's neck started to flush red the way it does when she's losing control of a room. She turned to Walt and she said, "I don't think this concerns you, Mr. Henley." Walt smiled. Walt has a smile that has gotten him out of 3 divorces and into the boardroom of every major developer in New England. He said, "Ma'am, with respect, I'm Beacon Hill's principal partner on a $42 million contract with this firm. I think it concerns me a great deal who's running the place." She had no answer for that. I picked up the folder again and I held it out to my father and I said, "Dad, did you really believe this would work?" He said, "Tessa, don't be dramatic." I said, "I'm being remarkably composed, actually. I'm asking you a direct question. Did you really believe that you could walk into my office and demand that I sign over my company to my brother on the basis of a document you printed off the internet?" He said, We are your family, we are not the internet. I almost laughed, I really did. I had to take a breath. I said, Mom, sit down please, all three of you. There are chairs by the window. Walt, Diego, would you give me 10 minutes? There's coffee in the break room. Renata will show you. Walt nodded. He and Diego left. Renata went with them, but I caught her eye on the way out and she gave me the smallest possible nod. She knew. She'd known since Monday. I'd briefed my senior staff on what was coming. My family sat down by the window. My mother sat in the middle, my father on her left, Hugh on her right, his ankle crossed over his knee, the smirk still on his face. I sat across from them. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. I had cried in the shower 3 days earlier and I was empty of all of it. I said, I'm going to say some things now, and I'm only going to say them once. You can interrupt me if you want. It won't change what happens next, but you can interrupt me if it makes you feel better. My mother opened her mouth. I held up one finger. She closed it. I said, Hugh, in June of last year you were fired from a marketing firm called Veritas Group. The official story was performance issues. The actual story is that a 23-year-old junior designer named Reina Cordero filed a formal complaint against you for repeated unwanted sexual comments and one incident of physical contact she did not consent to. Veritas paid her $140,000 and made her sign an NDA. I have her name. I have her current attorney's name. I have a sworn statement she gave to her attorney 6 weeks ago in anticipation of a possible defamation suit Veritas was considering against her for talking to a friend. The statement is in my office safe. I'm telling you this so you understand exactly what I'm holding. Hugh's smirk fell off his face like it had been physically struck. My mother said, that is a complete and vile lie. I said, Mom, I haven't finished. You can decide what's a lie after I'm done. I turned to my father. I said, Dad, 3 months ago, you co-signed a personal loan for Hugh in the amount of $210,000. The loan was for what he told you was a business investment. He used about $35,000 of it to pay back a private debt he didn't tell you about. He used about $90,000 to buy a car. The remainder is sitting in a checking account he hasn't told Britta about. He has been planning to use the rest as seed capital for the firm he intended to take from me today. He told you he was buying into a partnership. He was not. He was planning to take over my company by force and use your money to do it. I have the bank records. I won't tell you how I have the bank records, but I have them. My father's face went the color of dishwater. I said, Mom, I'm going to be honest with you. I expected better from Dad. I really did. He's a banker. He should have known better than to sign that loan without seeing a business plan. He should have known better than to walk into my office with that piece of paper. But you, I always knew about. You have spent 31 years telling me that I was less than my sister and less than my brother and less than the version of a daughter you would have preferred. You missed my graduation dinner because Hugh had a head cold. You sent me $20 for my birthday for 15 straight years, while you bought Camille a car for her 25th. You called my career a hobby in front of your friends at the club. I know because Aunt Lorraine told me. Aunt Lorraine has been telling me everything you say about me at the club for 9 years. Hi, Aunt Lorraine. If you ever watch this in your bridge group, thank you. My mother turned a color I'd never seen on a human being. I said, here's what's going to happen. You're going to take that folder. You're going to leave my office. You're not going to come back. If any of you contact me, or contact any of my employees, or contact any of my clients, including Mr. Teen Henley, who is currently drinking my coffee in the break room and who is going to know everything I just said by lunchtime, I will release Reina Cordero's statement to the press. I will release the bank records to Dad's employer, who I happen to know has been considering him for a board seat. I will release the private investigator's report on Hugh's last 3 jobs to Britta, who is, by the way, currently looking at apartments in Hartford and not New York, because she has known for 2 weeks that he was full of garbage and she is preparing to leave him. Hugh stood up. He said, "You bitch." I said, "Sit down, Hugh." He sat down. I did not raise my voice. I want to be very clear that I did not raise my voice. I said, one more thing. The building this office is in. The owner is a holding company called Dorrance Realty. About 14 months ago, Dorrance Realty was acquired by a private equity group out of Boston that I have done 6 projects with. I am, through a small advisory share, a minority owner of Dorrance Realty. I tell you this not because I have any intention of doing anything with it. I tell you this because, Dad, when you were planning this little visit, I want you to understand that the building you thought you might pressure into evicting me, the way you used to pressure the country club to seat us at a better table, is partially owned by me. The world has moved on while you were busy ignoring it. I have moved on. The firm has moved on. The only people who haven't moved on are sitting in this row of chairs. I stood up. I walked to the door of my office. I opened it. I said, "Leave, please. Don't make me call security. There is security. There has been security in the lobby this entire time." I asked them to give us privacy. My mother stood up first. She was trembling, not crying. Trembling. She picked up the folder. She held it for a moment like she was deciding whether to throw it at me. She put it back down on the chair. She said, "You are not my daughter." I said, "I haven't been your daughter for a long time, Mom. I'm sorry it took you this long to notice." My father walked out without looking at me. Hugh tried to say something on the way out, and my mother actually shoved him through the doorway. The reception area was very quiet. Renata was standing by the front desk with Walt and Diego. The 2 junior designers were pretending not to watch. Everyone watched. After the door closed, I stood there for a second. Walt came over. He didn't say anything. He just put his hand on my shoulder and squeezed, and then he went back to looking at the elevation drawings. That was September. Here's what happened after. Brittna filed for divorce in November. She moved back in with her parents, and she got a job at a community center in Hartford running their after-school art program. She and I have lunch every 6 weeks. She's doing better than I have ever seen her. Rinia Cordero, the junior designer my brother harassed, reached out to me through her attorney in October. I offered her a job at Brockwood Studio. She accepted. She started in February. She is currently the lead designer on a library project in Queens, and she is one of the most talented young architects I have ever worked with. My father did not get the board seat. I did not have to release anything. Somebody else in his organization did their own due diligence on the loan he'd co-signed and quietly let him know that the bank would prefer he take early retirement. He took it in January. My mother told everyone at the club that he'd decided to spend more time with the grandchildren. Aunt Lorraine told me he spends most of his time in the garage now. Hugh moved to Phoenix. I don't know what he's doing. I don't ask. Brittna says he doesn't pay his alimony on time, and she's filing to garnish his wages. Camille called me in March. She had heard through Aunt Lorraine what had happened. She said she wanted to apologize for the way she had treated me growing up. I listened to the whole apology. It was, to her credit, a real one. She did not ask for anything. She just said she was sorry, and she said she wanted to do better, and she said she understood if I never wanted to speak to her again. I told her I would think about it. I am still thinking about it. I am still thinking about it. I called her on her birthday and we talked for 20 minutes about her kids. It is a start. I am not in a hurry. The Civic Center broke ground in April. The mayor came. So did Walt and Diego and most of my team. Renata's mother flew in from Lima to see her daughter cut a ribbon next to me. I gave a 5-minute speech in which I mentioned my grandfather and his leather case of drafting tools. I did not mention my parents. They were not invited and they did not ask to come. The firm has 46 employees now. We opened the Boston office in May. I sleep 8 hours most nights. I bought a small house in Brooklyn last summer with a garden where I am slowly killing a rosemary plant. I am seeing a therapist named Dr. Augusta Heller, who tells me regularly that healing is not the same as forgiving, and that I am allowed to want one without the other. People ask me sometimes if I regret what I did. They ask if I think I was too harsh. They ask if I miss my parents. The answer to the first 2 is no. The answer to the third is sometimes, and only to the version of them I used to wish existed. What I learned, and what I want you to take from this story if you are someone who has lived with a family that treated you like a project to be corrected, is this. You do not owe your blood your peace. You do not owe a person who has spent decades belittling your work a single inch of your achievements. You do not have to wait for them to apologize before you build the life you want. You do not have to keep the door open for people who only walk through it to take inventory of what they can carry away. Build the thing. Build the firm, the practice, the studio, the kitchen, the classroom, whatever it is. Build it so well and so quietly and so completely that when they finally show up to claim a piece of it, they find that you have already built the door they walk in through, and you decide whether or when it closes behind them. My grandfather's leather case is still in my office. I keep his old triangle on my desk. Sometimes when I'm sketching late at night, I imagine him sitting across from me, the way he used to sit at our kitchen table on Saturday mornings. I think he would be proud. I think he would say I took my time. I think he would say I built something he could see from wherever he is now. And I think, finally, that is the only opinion of mine that I ever needed. When I look back on the morning my mother walked into my Manhattan office with that folder, I don't see a moment of revenge. I see the natural ending of a long, slow equation that my parents started writing the day they decided one child mattered more than another. Every choice they made along the way, the missed graduation, the $20 birthday cards, the laugh my father gave when I said I wanted to design buildings, the loan he co-signed for Hugh without asking a single real question. Each one was a small deposit into an account they never thought I would one day cash. I didn't bring down my family. They built the staircase themselves. I just refused to keep climbing it for them. I think about Marguerite a lot, more than I want to admit. Not with anger anymore, with something closer to pity. She spent 31 years certain that her job as a mother was to mold me into the daughter she could brag about at the club. And when I refused to be molded, she decided I was defective rather than considering that the mold itself might be wrong. That kind of certainty is its own prison. She is sitting in it right now, in a house my father can barely afford, telling the same friends the same stories about a daughter who supposedly broke her heart. The truth is, I didn't break anything. I just stopped letting her break me. What I want you to take from this, if you have your own version of a Hugh or a Marguerite in your life, is that walking away with grace is not the same as walking away weak. The strongest thing I ever did was the 2 years of quiet preparation before that meeting. Not the speech. Not the folder. The years of reading contracts I didn't have to read, of saving money I could have spent, of building real friendships with people like Walt who would stand beside me when it mattered. Strength isn't loud. Strength is patient. Strength is the woman who learns the rules of the game so thoroughly that when her opponents finally sit down across from her, they realize the game ended before they arrived. And character, I have come to believe, is what you build when nobody is watching and nobody is clapping. I built Brockwit's studio in rooms my parents never visited, on weekends my family never asked about, with money I earned at jobs they considered beneath me. That work belonged to me in a way nothing in that house ever did. They could not take it away because they had never been part of it. If you are out there right now, working on something your family laughs at, please hear me. Keep going. Keep your records. Keep your receipts. Keep your dignity. The day will come when they walk into your room and discover that the girl they dismissed has quietly become a woman they cannot reach. On that day, you will not need to shout. You will only need to smile and tell them to read page 2.